Siveza iqiniso sivuselela ukuthembeka.
Taking media self-regulation to media training institutions, unpacking Malawi media. So more from Malawi this morning, self-regulation model that they're using. Wisdom Chimgwede, the chairperson of the Media Council of Malawi, now brings us this presentation. Wisdom, it's over to you.
Thank you so much. Yes, I will be speaking to the Malawi model of self-regulation, and I'm hoping it also does speak to the models that have been used elsewhere in the region, or indeed in the African continent as a whole. I'm mindful, of course, of the fact that we do not have all the time in the world, and therefore we'll try and ensure that I speak, I run through with speed, but ensuring also that we're not completely losing out. So I've slashed out some of the slides, and I thought that the most critical part to begin with in wanting to understand regulation in the Malawi media context would be looking back a little bit. And I always start with the fact that in Malawi, we never had media training until somewhere around 1993, when three practitioners who had practiced for some time established our first school in Mzuzu. That was after, just slightly before the referendum in 1993. And by that particular time, what it meant was that the majority of the people who worked in the pre-democracy media houses, the Malawi Broadcasting Corporation, the National News Agency, the Malawi News and the Times, were mostly people that were trained as teachers, and of course then with practice they became good journalists and so on. Or indeed they had chanced some opportunity to train elsewhere, particularly in Zambia. A number of colleagues did train there. Then after referendum, we saw a proliferation of media houses, a lot of media houses, and of course a lot of training institutions also came on board. And this has been the trend until now, as Teresa was mentioning. We're still having an expansion in this space. A lot of people, institutions establishing journalism training institutions. The only challenge, of course, has been whether all of them are generating what the industry really needs in terms of the quality of journalists. But we have seen that over the years, we have developed a lot of people that we can point at as journalists, but we also developed, created a cadre that is still, can only be placed in the category of masquerades. Because training alone in a classroom does not make one a journalist. It is that which they do, it is that work that we do after a classroom that really generates the journalism, the journalist in us. So after 1993, around 94, the first parliament, some MP did mention in parliament the need to regulate, the need to police the media. And at that particular time, the institutions that existed, journalists that existed, said, no, probably we need to stop and see how best we can regulate ourselves than waiting for Parliament or indeed the state to regulate us. And that's how the Media Council of Malawi was established in 1996, and of course it became functional around 1998. Since then, the Media Council, has died several times, and of course came back several times, probably too many lives than a cat. So now, in looking at the self-regulation in the Malawi context, who does it apply to? So the first thing is that this is not only applying to a local journalist, if somebody who is working in Malawi, but whoever is a journalist and wants to come and practice in this country who have to abide by the rules of the game as set under our model of the self-regulation. This was thought to be something that's going to help us in ensuring that we are managing journalism the way it must be. So one, it looks at it places obligation on both the media houses and, of course, the journalists, the practitioners themselves, to ensure that news, advertisements, public announcements, and everything else that's coming out of journalism, as it were, is distinguishable from, is accurate and does not have, to misinform, and we are able to distinguish opinion, from news, and that we are, as it were, ethically correct to ensure that we're doing good to mankind. So at that particular moment, when the Media Council was being established, so it was established by media owners. So the media houses themselves saw merit in ensuring that we have a body that will be able to monitor, and ethical behaviors and what have you. And we did discover indeed that there were some merits in self-regulation. First of all, in that it is owned by the journalism itself, by the media organizations themselves, and therefore it could be something that each one would be able to probably subscribe to. And we've also seen over the years that it really helps us in ensuring that why we know that we've got rights, but we also must be able to remember that we do have responsibilities, and therefore we shouldn't harm other people using journalism. So we're regulating the media and ensuring that the media itself, each and every newsroom are also, and individual journalists are also able to know their limits, to know how far they can go with whatever they would want to do. So we've got a code of ethics and conduct, which is at the center of this self-regulation model. And we have seen over time that this is really something that could be a credible alternative to the court procedures, which sometimes take quite long, and they're also quite costly, not only on consumers who may have complained against the media, but the media houses themselves is quite, court procedures are quite costly. What is it that we have seen as a challenge with our model going forward? First of all, being a voluntary kind of a model, where we expect that media houses will accept that we must be policed, and indeed journalists, individual journalists who accept that there is a regulator. It has not been easy. A lot of, since we're still generating and developing and creating and training lots of new journalists coming onto the fold, a number of them do not know how the Media Council and why it came onto the fold. And over the years, very few people, very few media houses are still really seeing the relevance of having a media council. And that, of course, has got sustainability issues. We also need to ensure that the public, the people need to know that they've got somewhere, some space where they can go to complain. But you will still find that we still have a lot of people who would prefer going straight, to court, because they are yet to really understand what media council is all about, and that indeed it can stand in between them and the media houses wherever they feel wronged by a media house. So this particular model, the current one that we're using, how did it come about? So the first thing, having died, and the Media Council having died several times, we, particularly thanks to MISA and other stakeholders, we said we definitely cannot do without a media council, because if we leave the space just like that, then we'll be giving an opportunity to the state, we'll be giving an opportunity to politicians to take over the space and regulate us. We do not want to be regulated. We do not want statutory regulation, because we find it to be a little more negative to what the media aspirations will be than when we are able to regulate ourselves. So we undertook a study to look at several contexts, what are other jurisdictions are doing, and indeed we discovered that across the globe, several are into self-regulation. Of course, others are hybrid, so there is a bit of self-regulation and a bit of statutory that helps them get funding from the state, for example, Kenya and a few others. But as a country, we still, thought that as for now, we must stand, we must sit with what we already have, because we think that we have been able to reap fruits, we've been able to reap good results out of regulating ourselves, although we still have a number of challenges, particularly with acceptability and the like. So that's with our model, it's at all those levels. So we got at the individual level, we expect a practitioner to abide by the code of ethics and the professional conduct. And indeed, at the organizational level, the media institution should be able to regulate itself, regulate its practitioners. So it establishes, for example, the ombudspersons internally, who ensures that the editorial policy within the media houses are being used, and that the code of conduct by the Media Council is being respected, and journalists are operating the way it must. So at the umbrella level, that's where we got the Media Council of Malawi, of course, using the code of ethics, and of course with the membership and accreditation committees. We've got the ethics subcommittee, all those levels where all those committees are the ones that we use to ensure that we're monitoring the conduct of the practitioners, and of course the media houses. And these are also the committees that look at if there are any complaints from the public, what is it that we need to do, what was wrong, and what have you in together with the ombudspersons to ensuring that our consumers are not going straight to courts, for example, and for the broadcasting sector, they're not going straight to complaining to MACRA, the authority over broadcasters and what have you, because whatever the case, that even if they could be independent in courts, they are a state arm, and they can easily be abused. And at extra-media levels, now here with the model does empower. We really want to empower the citizenry to understand the role of the media and also be able to hold the media to account. Because we think that if the media are going overboard, it is only the citizens out there that will also be able to see that which we cannot be able to see. And if they raise such kind of things, it will be very critical, and it will help us all in checking, to ensuring that journalism is being practiced the way it must be. And just to strengthen that particular aspect, we've got an ICT platform for public feedback, where across the country, anyone can send in a text message, an SMS, or through email or through WhatsApp to this particular platform, complaining or indeed commending a media house for a good job and what have you. And so far, we're receiving great feedback from here, and we've been able to see things that we couldn't have been able to see, just because the public is now able to come. And of course, just to mention also that for the first time, we've really seen, mostly because we're working quite closely with the media houses in the accreditation process, accrediting of individual journalists. We have seen that for the first time as a country, we'll be able to give out press cards to over 700 journalists. But we know that we have more than 1,500 to 2,000 journalists in this country. So we still have a long way to go. So the ombudspersons that are working at the organizational level, these are helping us with self-regulation within the media outlet. They collect criticisms and of course suggestions to media users from your media users, working together within the media houses, and they also kind of mediating between the consumers and the media houses, and promoting dialogue between the audiences and the workers within the news outlets, and ensuring that the workers within the media house are respecting the rules and customs established within there. And this is the cadre that also ensures, that also rectifies, ethical and legal errors that might have been committed in the course of our job as practitioners. So this is our very critical committee, the Ethics, Complaints and Disciplinary Committee, in ensuring that we are able to ensure that journalism is being practiced the way it must. So it is responsible for handling all complaints and of course arbitration. This is where, when complaints come through the executive director, they are given to this particular committee, and it is the one that now begins talking to whoever is concerned, the complainant, of course, and the respondents. When this committee receives the complaint, they will write the concerned media house: "We've received this complaint. We want your take. We want your response to this within a specified period of time." And from there, we take that complaint back to the complainant, and of course, where need be, bring them together and talk issues around without going all the way to court. So they also look at issues of misconduct, the enforcement, and of course, doing all this, they always have regard to rules of natural justice. So, in conclusion, I would want to say that yes, self-regulation we really think is a very important model that we would ensure that the media independence, that would also ensure that journalists themselves are able to look at themselves as a profession that should be able to know what is wrong and what is right. But that also comes with the knowledge of the kind of the variegated world that we're dealing with, as that slide is showing. Quite a lot of different types of people are coming onto the profession, trained from various spheres. Some of them semi-cooked, some of them really well cooked. And as Teresa said, most of our training institutions do not have, cannot offer a practical journalism training, and that really has created kind of a problem, such that sometimes to deal with certain people that are practicing in courts is not as easy. But the biggest challenge, as I mentioned, is for a media council like ourselves that's advocating self-regulation to come to be recognized by the practitioner, by media houses, and of course, by the public. Because the public will always ask, so what? After you have, you have seen that somebody is wrong, what is it that you really can do that will ensure that others do not do the same next time. Thanks, Nina.
Thank you so much, Wisdom. We've got a question here from Peter Desalas to you. He says, Wisdom, do you think that the media self-regulation councils should themselves engage in training on ethics and legal aspects?
Yes, I think that is very, very critical on one side. But on the other, I would want to advocate for the training institutions that already existed to look at what it is that's lacking currently in and around issues of ethics and around of issues of legal, to ensure that the products that are churning out from those institutions, when they're coming to the industry, there should be people that are going to practice journalism the way it must. Of course, I mean, people that are into regulation could be brought on board when, just to talk around certain, aspects of regulation, certain aspects of ethics, because, I mean, not all of us go into training. There should be others that are doing this part, others who do the other part, others who do the other part. In so doing, we'll be able, to develop a journalism that's acceptable to all.
Thank you. Well, Patrick, I don't know if you have any questions or a question for Wisdom this morning.
Okay, thank you. Wisdom, I think you're talking about the ingredients around ethics, around the legality, around self-regulation, but these sound all like ingredients for what we're trying to cook here. And the meal to me sounds like accountability. Talk to us why the issue of accountability, particularly within the fourth estate, given the other three estates and the idea of balancing power, speaking directly to democracy, separation of power. How do we ensure not just an internal mechanism of accountability, but that the notion of accountability in the times of growing popularism, in the growing times of a greater elite capture, personal interests, how do we push the agenda and cement the concept of accountability? And who are we accountable to, is my question.
Who are we accountable to? I always say the citizens. Our consumers, I think, are the first that we need to respect, and of course, guided by the rules and regulations. Our laws, obviously, we are not existing in a vacuum. We work within the laws that are created to govern our countries, but where things would definitely get wrong is where the governing want to begin governing journalism in that particular context. Of course, as I did mention, challenges still abound, particularly when it comes to ensuring that you are, there is something that you can enforce. That's where the biggest challenge still does exist, to ensure that we are really accounting for our mistakes. Yes, I mean, I know that several media houses are able to, own up to their mistakes and apologize and what have you. But there are, there are several wrongs and there is a lot of debt that happens outside the platforms, outside the newsroom. It is in our conduct as journalists and what have you. The kind of picture that we create in what we do outside also has a bearing on what, the kind of journalism that we are practicing. I know that the conversation, by people outside of journalism, are that we just don't want to be policed because we want to, remain unruly and so on. But immediately we get to a point where we accept to be governed, to be regulated by the state. Obviously, a number of things will not go on the way they must. I mean, we've got several examples in several countries where such is the case. I mean, in this country, yes, we still have laws, several laws that must be repealed from our statutes, but we are relatively free. And that already is a fertile ground for us to grow in self-regulation.
Oh yeah, I think he's speaking to the issue. I think what we want to maybe tie it back to, Nina, is this issue of how what he's talking about ties back to to the theme of the conference, which is telling the truth and restoring trust. Can you speak to that and how those more like human principles or issues around humanizing journalism are key facets of telling the truth and restoring trust? Give us what your insights are regarding that.
Very critical. I mean, telling truth is the only ingredient that will create the trust, the level of trust that we need between us and our consumers. And I think it speaks to a number of things. The first thing is if we are really to restore the trust that may have lost, or we do have, I think it starts all the way from how we are trained in our training institutions, because it is only that which we will have internalized at that level that's going to help us when we get to the industry. And when we get into the industry, we always need to, it will always be very critical for our journalists to remember the tenets that make up good journalism, because you do not necessarily become a journalist with just that which you have learned in class. It is also in how you practice the same. So the practice part is where now things are getting really bad. I know that the biggest challenge also, not only in this country, but a number of African countries, is the fact that a lot of journalists cannot survive on their salaries, because the envelopes are not as fat as other trades. But then I always insist, if you think this is not where you belong, then why not quit? Because eventually the few rotten potatoes, create the road across, and all of us, the media houses, the media institutions, associations, and all that, will lose trust in the eyes of the public, and that's dangerous for the profession.
A quick follow-up, Nina, a quick follow-up just in terms of, you talked about practice. In the practice, do you think not just pre-service training, but in-service training, particularly when it comes to consolidating continuous professional development and the values of lifelong learning? Sometimes you're like, I was a journalist learning when I was studying. Now I'm a graduate. I don't have to learn anymore. Now I just write. How do we change that education ecosystem for journalists by ensuring, for instance, doctors have to get professional development points every year, so do nurses, that at a formal level, or do we make it more informal? But the issue that I'm trying to address here is continuous professional development, and what the roles and responsibilities are, not just media houses, but regulatory bodies, and how do we then share that responsibility?
I always insist that you only become a good journalist with training, and more training. And this is not only by institutions, even at your own level, even at the level of an individual journalist. There is a lot of opportunities online these days to learn new skills, to learn new things. But of course, this is not we shouldn't forget the fact that there is one fact in this part of Africa. In 1990s, coming to 2000 and what have you, there were a number of institutions that offered beautiful short courses, refresher courses, the NSJs and what have you of this world. All those institutions are now gone. And the same is mirrored at a local level. There were a number of institutions that offered beautiful, on-the-job trainings. Most of them are now gone. And now that the bigger problem now has also come to the fact that a number of journalists that have practiced it for a longer time are no longer in the newsroom. So you've got a crop that was supposed to be growing in the hands of the experienced, becoming editors, and you've got a fresh crop that really needs a lot of support, becoming the core on the ground reporting and what have you. So it's almost two blind people leading each other, and that is really taking us to some dead end.
How do we change that culture? Who leads that change? What's your call to action?
That change needs to happen at several levels. At training level, we really need a lot of things to happen, practical stuff. At the institutional level, we really need to ensure that those people that are in supervisor levels are able to coach their journalists and monitor what their journalists are doing when they go out there. At the individual level, even more important, because I always insist that nobody employs a journalist. Journalists employ themselves. It is that which you are able to do and that which you are able to demonstrate outside of the newsroom that will sell you through. And it is the same that will build the journalism that the world needs.
True wisdom coming from wisdom. Thank you so much, Mr. Chimgwede. It was lovely speaking to you this afternoon.
Siveza iqiniso, sivuselela ukuthembeka.